On December 20, 1996, a woman's body was found behind a Union 76 truck stop in Lake Township, Ohio. The woman was quickly identified as 27-year-old Victoria Jane Collins, who lived in Cleveland, Ohio. She was last seen a few days earlier leaving a bar in the Cleveland area with a woman and two men. Victoria was assaulted and passed away due to cardiac arrest. The police questioned the people she was last seen with, her friends and her family members. It led them no closer to finding out who did this to her, however. They collected DNA evidence that belonged to the suspect at the crime scene. In 2019, a 51-year-old man by the name of Samuel Legg was arrested for a different cold case in Medina County. Samuel had to give a DNA sample when he was arrested. When investigators entered his DNA into their database, they noticed that it matched the DNA found at a crime scene of the Victoria Collins case. That was not all. His DNA also linked him to a cold case from Lake County, Illinois. It also seems likely that he was involved in cold cases from Wood County and Mahoning County. Samuel used to be a truck driver in the Midwest, and he lived in Ohio at the time of the crimes. He was extradited to Medina County from Arizona on a $1 million bond. He is now still in custody in Ohio, awaiting trial. It took 24 years for this case to be solved. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost said, "Tenacious work by law enforcement and cutting-edge DNA technology have continued to unravel his crimes." On August 22nd, a woman's body was found in an apartment in Fresno County, California. She was identified as 22-year-old college student Debbie Dorian. Her body was bound at her hands and feet with duct tape. The duct tape was also wrapped around her head, covering her mouth, nose, and eyes. Investigators collected DNA evidence from the crime scene and entered it into CODIS database, but there were no matches. Then in 2002, investigators in Fresno learned that the DNA recovered from Debbie's case was matched to an assault in Visalia, California. The Visalia police did not have a suspect named either. A break in the case finally came in 2018 when investigators decided to make use of genetic genealogy. Genetic genealogy compares unknown DNA evidence from a crime scene to public genealogy databases, which are populated by the DNA of family members who voluntarily upload their DNA. This led investigators to 52-year-old Nikki Stain. In January 2020, he was charged with the assault and taking the life of Debbie. Debbie's mom was very happy to know who did this to her daughter before she passed away. She also expressed her gratitude to the detectives who helped solve the case. She said her daughter was a feisty and wonderful person. "You miss seeing her wedding, the holidays, and you miss what she would look like." It took 24 years for this case to be solved.
Nancy Daugherty lived in Chisholm, Minnesota. She was a mother of two and married. Her husband was overseas for the Air National Guard. Nancy worked as a part-time bartender and as a nursing home aide. She was unfaithful to her husband and also had a boyfriend. On the night of July 15, 1986, Nancy and her boyfriend went out drinking. Thereafter, the boyfriend dropped her off at her home. The next morning, he tried to contact Nancy, but she did not answer. He then asked the police to do a welfare check on her. Chisholm police knocked on her door, but no one answered. They finally managed to enter her home and made a startling discovery. Nancy Daugherty's body was found on the floor. She had been assaulted and beaten before she was strangled. The police were able to retrieve DNA evidence of a possible suspect at the scene of the crime. A DNA profile was then created. However, the profile matched no one in a criminal database. The police interviewed and collected DNA from more than 100 people, but it led nowhere. The boyfriend was briefly looked into because he was the last person to have seen her. He was ruled out, however, same with the husband. The police had no other leads, and the case sadly went cold. Then, in 2020, detectives at the Chisholm Police Department had the idea of contacting Parabon Nanolabs, a company which analyzes public genealogy databases and helps law enforcement programs identify case leads. Parabon Nanolabs' work turned up an apparent match. 52-year-old Michael Allen Carbo Jr. is a Chisholm, Minnesota resident. The identification of Michael raised a few questions. Michael was only a teenager at the time Nancy's life was taken, and he did not know her. He was not even a person of interest back in 1986. He did, however, attend school with her children and lived less than a mile from her home. A follow-up investigation did match Michael's DNA to the original DNA profile. He was arrested in July 2020 and could be sentenced to up to 40 years in prison for what he did. Chisholm Police Chief Vern Manor said, "This is the day Nancy Daugherty's family and all of Chisholm have waited for over 34 years." He also read a statement made by Nancy's daughter, Gina. "My mom loved to help people. There are no words to describe the terrible holes that were left in so many lives, including my own."